we couldn't stop Trump from lying. We would come up from the campaign rally, we'd go back up onto the plane. I'd look over at him and say, what the hell did you say that for? That wasn't anywhere near the truth. And he would say, well, what the hell difference does it make? No one cares. And in fact, if I say it often enough, people will believe it. He once said to me, 1 billion people know who I am. 500 million of those people hate my effing guts. He goes, but think of the possibilities on the other 500 million. Did Trump make it worse for all of us? Because now politicians look at this and say, okay, all politicians lie. That's the same way you and I are breathing. But now Trump has made it even bigger. Well, Trump is a smart guy. People shouldn't underestimate him. Joining us now is Bill Adair. He's an award-winning journalist and pioneer in political fact-checking, which, man, do we need a lot of that these days. The title of the book, which is coming out October 15th, Beyond the Big Lie, the Epidemic of Political Lying, Why Republicans Do It More, and How It Could Burn Down Our Democracy. So I feel that democracy is already burning, by the way. And the only thing I don't like about your title is the fuse is too long. See, that's one of Trump's long ties there. But, I think it's already burning. I think it's burning through. But we're going to talk about it, Bill. But before I get to the book, I want to talk a little bit about your background because you have a fascinating story of how you got to be who you are. Let's start there. And then I want to go to the founding of PolitiFact in 2007.
Sure. So my background is as a newspaper reporter. I covered a lot of different things. I covered local government. I covered transportation. For about 10 years, I was an aviation reporter. My first book was about a plane crash. It was a behind-the-scenes account of how the NTSB solves a plane crash mystery called The Mystery of Flight 427. I switched to covering politics in about 2000. I was with Al Gore the night that he won the presidency in Nashville, Tennessee. And I loved covering politics, but I realized that we needed to do more fact checking. And so I went to my editors of the St. Petersburg Times and I said, hey, let's start a fact checking website. There had been some fact checking, some great work by factcheck.org, an organization from the University of Pennsylvania. But I wanted to do it differently. I wanted to do it with a truthometer, which would provide ratings that would summarize the journalism that we did in a catchy way. But there would still be journalism behind it. And so we started PolitiFact in 2007. We fact-checked the 2008 campaign, and then we won the Pulitzer Prize for national reporting in 2009, which was a pretty big deal. We were the first website to win a Pulitzer Prize, and we sparked a lot of the fact-checking that goes on today, both in the United States and around the world. So very proud of that.
And I would also add that it's a source. I mean, people go to that to hear the truth. I mean, they hear something from a politician, they're like, okay, let me check PolitiFact. And you guys, if you say it's true, then people say, all right, must be true. So I give you credit on that. Obviously, we need more of that in politics, but we have more lying, okay? And you write about that, and you write about it brilliantly. This gentleman here, Donald Trump, who's represented on the cover of your book.
My editor wondered, I'm glad to see you picked up on that. My editor wondered if people would get the red tie as Trump. So
yeah, well, no, of course. I mean, and everyone gets that. So your editor probably doesn't realize that, but the problem with the whole thing is that we couldn't stop Trump from lying. And so I used to go to rallies with him. I did 71 campaign stops with him. We all own this, by the way. And so I've owned it more openly than others, but I'm not really exactly sure how other people can live with themselves. But we would come up from the campaign rally. We'd go back up onto the plane. I'd look over at him and say, what the hell did you say that for? That wasn't anywhere near the truth. He would be loosening that red tie and getting himself another shirt. He always changed shirts in between these rallies. And he would say, well, what the hell difference does it make? No one cares. In fact, if I say it often enough, people will believe it. He told Leslie Stahl that. He said that if I just keep repeating it, there's a large enough group of people Trump is a smart guy. People shouldn't underestimate him. He once said to me, 1 billion people know who I am. 500 million of those people hate my effing guts. He goes, but think of the possibilities on the other 500 million. And he's selling them Bibles and Bitcoins and all different types of things. So I guess the point is, did Trump make it worse for all of us? Because now politicians look at this and say, okay, Trump, I thought I was a medium-based liar. All politicians lie. That the same way you and I are breathing. And so, but now Trump has made it even bigger. Am I wrong?
Oh, no, absolutely. I think one thing I do in the book, rather than write an ordinary kind of dull chapter on the history of lying, if you're like me, you see a chapter like that and you sort of skim over it. I wrote it like this. I wrote it as the Lying Hall of Fame. Who or what deserves to be in the Lying Hall of Fame? Now, obviously, Donald Trump does. But I went back and looked at prominent people and things that sort of set us on this course for where we are today. And so I chose an interesting mix that includes Roger Ailes and Rupert Murdoch, because I think they've been really important. Big Tobacco and ExxonMobil, because I think they sort of established the way that corporations can lie. I chose different presidents ranging from Lyndon Johnson, Richard Nixon, and then, of course, Trump. But one figure who a lot of people said was really important, because let's remember, and you noted this, political lying didn't begin with Donald Trump. And although he is by far the biggest liar that we've had in American history, this problem was a huge problem before he came along. So when did that change? Well, for the Republican Party, I think it changed with Newt. When Newt Gingrich came along in the early 90s, a lot of people I interviewed told me that really changed the culture of the Republican Party. And it created this sort of anything goes to win mentality. Now, some people I interviewed take it back further and put more credit to Ailes, and when Ailes worked for Nixon in the 1960s. But the consensus seemed to be more for Newt Gingrich, who really changed that culture. But you're right. Trump just in a whole different league. And then what's scary is the way that the other people in the Republican Party echo his lies. The way they just say, the way they will go along with what he says, repeat what he says, defend what he says, and that's really frightening.
So, I want to address something with you that we know is also true. Vice President Harris tells lies. Joe Biden tells them. Hillary Clinton told them. There's one famous American president that hated it more than anybody. That was Dwight Eisenhower. There's a great interview of him. He's in Gettysburg. He's retired. Cronkite goes to see him, and he says, yeah, my two big regrets, I lied about the U-2 space plane. I remember that. He said it was a weather balloon, and then, the CIA told him the pilot was dead. Of course, Francis Gary Powers was not dead. And then he lied about it for Joe McCarthy related to MacArthur. So how did we go from 65 short years ago, a 5-star general who was the American president and had some level of rectitude, to where we are today? How does that downward shift happen so aggressively, Bill?
So that's summed up by a couple people who use the same word, Anthony, with me. Shame is gone. And politicians don't feel the shame that they used to feel about lying. So why is that? So a couple of factors. One is gerrymandering. Their constituents are so gerrymandered that they're either all very Democratic or all very Republican. And so when these House members go to their town halls, they're hearing cheers and applause. They're not hearing many moderates who are like, you got caught the other day saying something I don't think you should have said. Their districts are echo chambers. Then the media has been depleted at the local level. So there's not much local journalism that's questioning these guys for what they say. So they come up through the House, through state legislative offices, and they're not held accountable to what they say. And so they're not feeling shame. They're feeling like, oh, I can do anything I want. And so I really think that's a major difference from the way it used to be back in the 60s and 70s, when House members had districts where they had to run and win the middle. They weren't so gerrymandered. And the partisan media, and this is another huge factor, of course, the partisan media wasn't a factor back then the way it is today. Today, you have a partisan media that not only doesn't hold them accountable for their lies, but it feeds off of it. Think about what we saw after the big lie of the 2020 election. Fox lost viewers because it wouldn't go along with the big lie. So, so telling the truth was bad business for Fox. That's really scary. And so all of that contributes to this environment where politicians don't feel shame. And so we need to change that environment back so that there are more incentives for telling the truth.
Okay, so there's a couple of things that are in here that are really disturbing to me. Okay, and I want to go to the January 6th situation and the lies that radicalized people on January 6th and the story of 𝗕cie 𝗵𝗃𝗁𝗃. Can you take us through that?
Sure. So the 𝗕cie story was really disturbing to me too. So 𝗕cie 𗗵𝗃𝗁𝗃 was a very dedicated expert in disinformation. She graduated from Bryn Mawr College. She wanted to dedicate herself to public service, and she took a job at the Department of Homeland Security running a new group that was supposed to be sort of an internal coordinating group that would help DHS agencies all coordinate their efforts on disinformation. It was given probably the worst name in the history of naming federal agencies. It was called the Disinformation Governance Board. And then DHS, which has never had a good public affairs or communications organization, they, instead of telling people what this thing was going to do and not do, they just leaked the news about it to Politico, which put out a 4-sentence or 3-sentence blurb about it in Politico Playbook. And so that was all people read about the Disinformation Governance Board, something that sounded like it came from George Orwell. So the DHS said nothing about it, and so the void was filled by Republicans who just made stuff up. And within hours, it just spiraled into lie after lie after lie that it was going to censor the internet and they were going to limit what you could say, and on and on and on. And it was the Ministry of Truth. So it was really scary what happened. Suddenly, 𝗕cie 𗗵𝗃𝗁𝗃, dedicated public servant, is worrying about her safety. She goes to bed the first night, puts chairs under the doorknobs of her house because she's worried somebody's going to break in. And she starts getting death threats because people in conservative media are saying terrible things about her, making things up all the time, making things up about the Ministry of Truth. And so now there are multiple villains in this. And one of the bad guys is DHS for not explaining what this thing was going to do and not do. So I was fascinated by this story. As a Washington journalist for many years, I was fascinated by how DHS bungled how this came out. So her story is sort of the backbone of the book, because it's a story of not just political lying, but how Washington works and doesn't work.
So it's interesting, it's coincidental. About a week before that fiasco and her ultimate resignation, which was Scaramucci-like, by the way, I think it only lasted about a half of a Scaramucci. She was on my podcast, and we were interviewing her related to her book on "quote unquote" how to win the information war. And the reason I brought it up is that a lot of elements of what was going on in her book are in your book. That we now have people that have just decided that their path to power is going to be through lying. And they also know that because we've segmented the media, this is really my question, is the segmentation that's taken place, Bill, in the media further this? So meaning you said something, Fox said the minute they stopped the lying, they lost viewers. Does the segmentation in the media reinforce certain lies on both sides?
Oh, absolutely. And it's here's what I do with my students. So I teach at Duke undergrads, and I teach a couple different courses, news writing. I also teach a course that's called News as Moral Battleground. And the way I recommend my students consume media is I tell them to think of it like the food pyramid. So the base of the food pyramid is news, consume news. The middle is analysis, like consume analysis. And then a little bit of opinion. But don't make opinion journalism the bulk of your diet. And then at the top, always try to consume at least one serving every day of an opinion you disagree with. So listen to a podcast from someone you disagree with, or read a column you disagree with, but try every day to consider something that you disagree with. But that I call it Bill's media consumption pyramid. That the whole idea of that is to get back to this healthy diet. What's happening instead? People are just consuming opinion journalism from their side. And I don't think that's healthy. And so, but that reflects what you're alluding to, Anthony, which is this fragmentation of the media. And that just, that sort of puts us into our own tribes, and it makes it harder for us to understand the other side. It makes it harder for us to have a conversation. And so I think that's why I tell my students, consume something every day that you disagree with.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's I don't know, it's a weird situation. You have in the book, the Lying Hall of Fame, which I love, okay, because you've got people in there like Lyndon Johnson, Bill Clinton, who you describe, and I'll quote you, an unusually good liar. I mean, he could lie with great sincerity. And of course, there's just Donald Trump that's almost like a rambling liar. And the weird thing about Trump is he's lying right to your face. He's lying. But for whatever reason, people have decided to accept it. So go ahead.
I'll ask you about Trump and lying. So did you ever feel, did he have a need to justify his lies? I mean, from what you were saying earlier,
indiscriminate, shameless lying.
And why do you think he lied? Like what I mean, I in the book,
it's effective.
And he gained what by lying, do you think?
So I think he gained I think he felt that if he lied, it felt good to people. If I tell you that I'm going to balance the budget in 4 years, and I'm brand new to the scene, I'm a brand new politician, so I'm not Bill Clinton, Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, you pick the politician. I'm new to the scene. There's a group of people out in America that say, okay, wait a minute, he's a businessman. He was on The Apprentice. He's a successful guy. Maybe maybe he can balance the budget in 4 years. Maybe he can do that. And so with the lie, Bill, comes hope.
Sure.
With the lie comes cognitive dissonance. I've got two choices. They're both bad choices, but he's promising me something that the other side isn't. Of course, he went on to create $7.8 trillion of deficit spending. So just people understand that's George Washington to George W. Bush, $7 trillion. And then Donald Trump, $7.8 trillion in 4 years. So it's not only a lie, it's just a ridiculous antipode to the reality that Trump actually represents. But you have this lying Hall of Fame. Talk us through some of those, and how did you rank them?
Sure. Well, I was careful not to rank them, but at one point I was musing that if you built the lying Hall of Fame, that it would be like on Lake Erie next to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and what would the exhibits be? My goal, though, was really to be a tour of lying through modern history. Now, I don't have every conceivable person in there. It was more a creative way to discuss the modern history of lying. But you mentioned a few. I have those presidents. Obviously, I include Trump. One unusual thing in my lying Hall of Fame is the couch from Fox and Friends. And my reasoning for that was I had included Murdoch because Murdoch is bigger than Fox. Murdoch is responsible for this global empire of different kinds of media, some of which has told some colossal lies over the years. And I interviewed my friend David 𝗕liche, who's written a great book about Murdoch called Murdoch's World. But then I also wanted to recognize the technique that one of Murdoch's properties, the Fox News Channel, uses. So I included the couch from Fox and Friends. And if you ever watch that show, it's a work of art. The way that the hosts sit on that couch and slyly serve up propaganda. And I as a reporter who covers this stuff, I am just so impressed with what they do. So I included that also.
Okay, and I've been on that couch, and the funny thing about that couch is I don't even think they realize they're lying anymore. I think they're in the soup. I think it's just a little bit of it's like a Jonestown situation where people believe each other even though it's implausible. All right, so we're at the point in the podcast where my team and we came up with 5 words that we culled from your book. So I'm going to read out the word, and then I want you to give me a 1 or 2 sentence reaction to the word. Okay, you ready?
Yep.
Say the word Democrat.
Still lies some struggles to communicate effectively. Yeah, lies some struggles to communicate effectively.
Okay, but both have the problem. I say the word Republican.
Really, by far the biggest liars in our political system, crippling our political discourse.
But and by the way, the fish thinks from the head down, so they've all taken Trump's lead, and they've all become mega liars. Okay, all right. So I'm going to say the word fact.
The atomic unit of a healthy political discourse.
Okay. And what about lie?
The element that is polluting our political discourse and needs to be dealt with.
Okay. Are we immune though? Are we immunized from the lies now, where we glaze over? The lies are coming in. We know they're lies, and we just.
I don't think it's immunity. I think it's fatigue. I think that
Good answer.
we're so weary of it, and we've gotten to a point where we don't know what's true, and it's just sad. And I hope we can get back to a discourse that is more fact-based.
Okay, so the title of the book is Beyond the Big Lie, The Epidemic of Political Lying, Why Republicans Do It More, and How It Could Burn Down Our Democracy. And so, Bill, it's great to talk to you. You make me worried, though, Bill, okay? I want to keep my hairline going into my 70s. So you're going to make me lose my hair if I spend more time with you. Okay? I'm worried, Bill. Got me worried. But thank you so much for joining us on Open Book.
Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed this.